Cellar. Finally getting over the second virus I had. And we might be getting back to normal around the house here. Haven't done a hell of a lot on social media for the last while. Okay, now, several people made comments on the pie game. When I get to the last one, then we'll address it. I think the pie game would be a wonderful legacy event to honor Jim every year. Okay, great idea. Huge fan of early issues of The Dragon. The magazine reinforced the magical do-it-yourself approach to our hobby. Thank you for your work there. I'm working my way backwards through your videos, but I've yet to hear details about your excellent hat. Can you please share? Do you mean my kepi? My cap? My cap? It's a Civil War replica. I bought it at least 25 years ago from a little ad in the back of Military History magazine, I believe. And the company did movie and theatrical replicas and duplicates. And I remember at the time, it cost me a fair amount of money. But I've never regretted it because it's made really well and it's held up really well all over these years. And of course, it's a Union artillery. Playing in your Thursday night GaryCon game was a highlight of the con for me. Thanks again, sir. The sax and misericord will both be featuring in my games from now on. Yeah, I give the pre-gens a couple of interesting weapons, and I'm taking along pictures of them to show in case not everybody knows what they are. The sax, I think, is probably one of the most vicious short weapons, and practical and handy. An incredible knife. I thought about bringing you a pie during a Will of Blame game, but I felt it might not be my place. Thank you for your time. I always remember taking 3d4 damage from smashing my face into the ground repeatedly. Yeah, that was pretty cool, wasn't it? No, I mentioned the early character sheets, and it was We Warriors. Thank you for remembering that for me. We Warriors put out some cool stuff. They did. Jim is missed by all of us who interacted with him over the years and enjoyed his works. Good advice. Okay, yes, he is. Good advice on murder hobos. There are so many ways to drive home. That's a no-no for DMs. There's so many ways to drive home. That's a no-no for the DMs to use. From non-alignment to alignment-based, punishment from the divine, kingdom-wide reactions, and more are all tools I often wonder why more DMs don't use in modern gaming. I think I might have an opinion on that answer, and that is that I believe it's only us old-timers that feel free to freelance, as it were. I think a lot of the newer gamers, if it's not written into the adventure or whatever, they don't deviate because they weren't inculcated with that spirit of ad lib, street theater, steal an idea where you find it, that we all did in the early days. And that's a shame because there's not a lot of outside the box thinking when that happens. My first thought was that continuing the pie tradition will always keep his memory alive. We had a similar thing with a camping group I'm in, cherishing. A cherished old member died, and they still carry on some of his old habits, including the cherry soaked in liquor. I could continue the pie event and tell some Jim Ward stories every time. Yeah, but I don't have that many great Jim Ward stories. They'd probably start getting repetitive. But this was answered. You might have something here. We regularly shop at Fair Oaks Farm in Indiana, going to and coming from Gary Pecan. They have awesome homemade cherry hand pies, which they do. Hand pies. This is in response. Now, there's a turn of phrase. I think I know what you mean. Here in New Zealand, a small pie that fits in the hand is a staple. I've called these hand pies myself in the past. Is that what you refer to? Yeah, it's a pie about as long as your hand, domed, flat along the bottom, slits in it for when it's baked, and big sugar granules sprinkled over the top of the crust. And I'm thinking that might be what I'm going to do from now on, is order ahead so that I know I got them there, and order 10 of those pies to pick up and take with me. And then I no longer need, all I need is napkins. I no longer need utensils and forks, and they're really good cherry pies. And that's probably what I'm going to do. So many people have said something about it that, okay, I'm going to keep doing the pie game, I guess. A lot of people have asked what started the pie game. Well, I did some things for Jim way back in the days, and back in the late aughts, back in the late aughts and into the next decade. Sometime in there, I did some things for him and helped him out, and he was adamant that he was going to pay me back, do something for me. And finally, in exasperation, I said, fine, bring me a cherry pie to the next GaryCon, and he did, and we've been doing it ever since. And so it was a personal thing. So he's not here to bring the pies. I've decided I will. Hi, Tim. Had a great time in your Wheel of Blame game at GaryCon on Saturday. I made it out alive, but I came out short in arm and without my scalp. Oh, yeah. The coin I earned has become one of my most prized possessions, and I hope you also enjoyed the print I gave you. Yeah, I do. Thanks. First, I'd like to apologize for when my buddy Evan so thoughtlessly accused you of making a pun after you had just earlier Gary's own tendency towards pun. Yes, and I remember it, and it was a bunch of bird people, and I used the word aflutter. That's not a pun. That's a clever play on words. And yes, there is a difference, because from the people that appreciate puns, I'm told that the best puns are ones that make you groan. No, that was just a chance to use a word that fit and was a clever play on words. I don't do puns, and if I do, it's totally unintentionally. Well, of course, okay. While I recognize that you technically used it correctly and his labeling of pun is objectionable, you must understand that my friend is quite troubled. Please forgive his disrespect. My question to you is this. You and I both went outside during the break and hit our respective oil pins. Is it cool if I say we smoked together? It's a fact. It's a fact. Okay. Dear Tim, Long Johnson, or size matters, or how to resolve weapon length advantage in combat. Alright, what mechanic is at hand to simulate maintaining use of reach advantage? Upon first engagement, longer weapons users should gain an advantage against opponents with shorter weapons. But in the to or fro of melee length, the length advantage will probably be lost, despite the long weapon character's wishes, training, and weapons experience. I don't. I don't care if you're carrying a short sword or if you're carrying a hand and a half. You're going to roll a 10 side. I don't care if you're carrying a Zweihander or a two-hander. Everybody's going to roll. Now, what I am likely to do is if someone were carrying that, and they don't, unless it's something they managed to pick up or take off in a component or something, is I would penalize their initiative. I don't deal combat as some sort of cinematic. I view combat as a big, swirling, confusing melee where people are just swinging at stuff that doesn't look like a friend. I seldom allow targeting of an individual, unless, of course, there's like two of them. But it's just not the way I prefer to play combat. I'm not into the martial arts. I'm not into the relative advantages of the German longsword over the Frankish longsword. Combat is the ability to avoid a fatal blow. I just don't get into that kind of detail, or nitpicking if you prefer. And if you do, that's fine. That's fine. If you got a group that's into the weapons and the lengths and all that stuff, do what seems natural. Is one sword being 4 inches longer than the other much of an advantage at keeping someone at bay? I wouldn't think so. Is a Viking longsword an advantage at keeping somebody with a Roman short sword at bay? Possibly, if they're just standing there and squaring off. But in the helter-skelter of combat, if the person with the short sword is skilled and can get inside the swing of the longsword, bye-bye longsword. What mechanic would you employ to indicate successful maintenance of martial distance when a character has a longer weapon and wishes to keep that advantage? I would say, if that's what they want to do, again, I don't get into the nitty-gritty of martial advantages, but if that's what they want to do, then I could simply say, okay, I don't wish to strike them, but I do wish to keep them at bay with my longer reach. And I'd probably give them a couple of pluses on that if that's all they were trying to do. I don't fight near combat pits or whatever, so I can't really go into any greater detail or answer than that at this time. As a side note, Lennox Lewis, David 2 a boxing match in 2000. Lewis kept 2 at arm's length while quite literally conferring a massive advantage to himself and ultimately the victory. Well, that's what happens when a short-arm boxer boxes a long-arm boxer, or a short-arm puncher tries to box a long-arm boxer. That's boxing. That's not weapons fighting. That's not fighting to the death. It's not trying to slice someone's tendons in the back of their knee. It's boxing. What are your thoughts about level limits for demi-human characters? I know Gary had envisioned a humanocentric milieu for DA, and the level limits were a way to enforce that and to balance out the abilities of the non-human characters. Did you ever encounter anybody who played a halfling fighter, knowing full well that they'd be limited to 4th level? How was that handled? Well, when we did that, we retired that guy and started up a new one. All right? Or we didn't play that one. I had a famous example of a non-human going beyond the stated level, and it happened at Gary Con in 1974. I went down into the dungeon as a 5th level dwarf, a myrmidon, and because of events that happened and being conferred this high honor by a dying dwarf lord, I exceeded 5th level. I once asked Gary about that, and he said, yeah, there's always an exception that proves the rule. And that was his comment. I think there should be limits, yes. And if I had my way, I'd put limits on half-elves first. And I don't care about Tolkien says. That's one interpretation of elves. Just one. There's several other interpretations of elves that have them anywhere from 3 feet tall and up. So whose elves are you talking about? The Tolkien elves? Don't get me wrong, I admire greatly J.R.R. Tolkien's writing, but that's just one interpretation of elves, just as his dwarves are just one interpretation of dwarves. Just one. Popular, widespread, I can't argue that. But it isn't the Bible any more than D&D is the Bible and infallible. Set of guidelines to have fun with. So yeah, I knew people that played low levels just to try them out. Yeah. Because they wanted to be role players and role play gaming players. And so they tried out several different roles. See what they liked. See what they felt they had an affinity for. With mages being so feeble at low level and so powerful at high, can you explain the thinking behind this? Well, yeah. In my view, it makes them desirable play from level 5 upwards, but a bit of a hindrance to a party below this level. Personally, I feel this pushes the wizard to role play more at low level, as they cannot fireball their way out of a tricky position. Well, yeah. You just mentioned it yourself. It forces to role play. A level 1 or level 2 wizard is really nothing more than a hedge wizard, if you will. Knows a couple of cute tricks. Maybe is some actual. Excuse me, I had to move my chair. They might actually know a couple of actual spells, mild cantrips or whatever, and sets out to learn more. And yeah, it's tough when you're a wimp. You know, I don't care. You know, you max out on a wizard and max out on a fighter. 4 points and 8 points is not a hell of a lot of difference if you get involved in a big melee early on. It's not a hell of a lot, believe me. Give me one die roll. And the 4 can roll 1s every time. And the 8 can roll 2 4s and be dead before the 1. So it's all dice. It's all dice. Luck. And statistical odds. And you put your finger on it. You got to be glib. You got to be smooth. You got to be slick to survive at that low, weakly, wimpy level. And you take down all the slights, all the mistreatments, all the anything that you had to take when you were little, and when you're 7th or 8th level, you come back and you fireball their ass. On Words of Power, if we take the Vancian magic system as our basis, what effect would Words of Power have on that system? Would they break the system or slot in okay? I don't like them. They'd probably break the system. And it's a concept that has been addressed individually in individual spells. Stone to mud, rock to mud, mud to stone, back and forth. The transmutations. Okay, that's a whole lot of that. I would not have a word of power air to just suck all the air out of a given area. I don't care how small it is. Nah, don't like the feel of that fit of that for my game. Not being able to utter a word like that, and if I found myself playing in a system that had something like that, I'd hope that the ability to use something that awe-inspiring and all-encompassing would be at least 15th level. And when I say 15th level, I'm talking about first edition 15th level. Badass. Naming the word of power for water allows some control of water. Well, there are spells that can do that. And they compares it similar to DC's Green Lantern, who manipulates a ray of green light from his finger into various shapes as mechanisms. Yeah, okay, that's comics and we're fantasy, and if you want to put something like that in there, be very, very, very careful. Because Green Lantern happened to be one of my favorites growing up, and Green Lantern could crock any D&D campaign without a whole lot of trouble. What level? There is no first level Green Lantern. Like having a first level Silver Surfer. How's that happen? But then again, you're welcome to go a different direction than that. That's, it's fine. But, and to end that, how do I feel about the concept? I believe that the manipulation of elements and stuff is sufficient in fantasy role-playing. I also believe that anything that goes much beyond first or second AD&D is a system breaker. I know a couple of people, you give them something like that and they'll broke your campaign in 3 adventures or less. A well-balanced system is a thing of beauty and not easy to achieve. My opinion only. Okay, we only had a certain amount this week, and that's pretty much answers all the comments that I had. Either I didn't understand the question that was written about Geases and stuff like that last time, because I apparently offended the person. So that wrote, apparently, I never mean to offend unless I tell you I'm meaning to offend. So perhaps I misunderstood it or whatever. It sounded to me like this person was laying a geas on me, and I was simply replying back equally tongue-in-cheek, you simply don't have the power to lay a geas on me. But anyway, all right, let's sit back a minute and remember the good old days when we first started playing role-playing. What was it that brought you to try it out? Now, in my case, this really interesting guy I knew said, oh, you got to come to this convention and check out this new game I developed. And I said, what kind of game? And he tried to explain it. And the way he worked his way through it and around it. And then I said, yeah, okay, sounds like I'll give that a shot. Sounded interesting. Go be somebody else doing something somewhere else, gaining fame and glory. Sure, why not? And so I did. And I enjoyed it. And I came to love it. And then later on, I was fortunate enough to be able to write little bits and pieces of it, filling in the holes and the cracks. That's what brought me. The wonder, the joy, the something different. Role-playing. As opposed to shoving counters across a hex-gridded board. Excuse me. Or, 8 cavalry figures 11 inches across the table, which are great pursuits. I love them both. But this was different. So, now that you went and found this new thing and you tried it, there's a fundamental question that's come to me and I've pondered over in recent weeks. And that is that there seems to be a dichotomy in our game hobby. There's people that role play, and then there's people that rule play. They're either rules lawyers that will try to trip you up at every opportunity, or fanatical devotees of only one system and maybe only one form of one system and don't see beyond those blinkers. That's the rules they want to play with. I see it the other way. I'd rather go try something new. I don't care. We're all just there, especially in the beginning, till we figure out what in the heck is going on. We're all just there rolling dice. And whoever's at the end of the table giving us instructions is telling us, okay, roll this die, roll those dice. Reading out numbers and that. It doesn't matter if you think that, that number should have had a better result. It's a different system. Go with the flow. I rolled the dice. Yay, you hit the monster. How well did I do? I don't know. Roll a 10-sider. Ooh, I hit it for 7. That's how well you did. That's when you're role playing as opposed to rule playing. Now, yeah, there's got to be some rules. Otherwise, it'd just be worse than the Wild West. Everybody would be playing like the Knights of the Dinner Table. So think about that. What kind of gamer are you? Now, another question to ask yourself, especially if you're the DM, what adventures do you run for your group? Do you create them yourselves? Or do you buy, written modules, printed modules? Do you play the printed modules verbatim, or do you dicker with them a little bit and trim this and trim that, change this, change that? Do you? Which do you do? I think pre-printed, pre-written, published modules are fine for a couple of times, or if the subject matter is particularly interested or the place that they're adventuring is particularly interesting. But I favor going my own way and creating my own stories. Just me. Now, what's your take on borrowing ideas? Appendix N. Something in there you like? Fool with it, mold it, shape it, make it your own. Put it in your game. Let your players figure out, what in the hell is this? Because isn't that why we started playing? Because we didn't know what was going on. We were wondering about it all. There was a certain awe involved with, whoa, this is some fun. I can go and do this. I can go and be that. The reason I ask this is because I spoke about them last week, and I've been thinking about them since. And that's the Wasted Lands, which is a very familiar fitting skin for fantasy role-playing. The premise is like a 15, 16-page book. And when I say page, I'm talking about full-size, hardbound fantasy rulebook size pages. It's a long story that does a marvelous job of explaining the world, explaining where you are in the world, and what's outside the door there waiting for you when you enter the world. So what if you got to roll different numbers? So what if you got to roll different dice? Why'd you sit down at the table? To run the same old system or to try something new? And I don't mean necessarily even trying the system, trying a new setting where there's different rules at play about how the world works and interworks with other parts of the world. Nothing I used to like better than sitting down with a group, having something in front of me they'd never ever seen before. So not only could nobody challenge me, because hey, I'm only reading what's printed, but they had to look at it from a brand new, fresh perspective and figure out what it was and how they were going to deal with it. I think The Wasted Lands is a good example of good rules. Now, I'm not aware of any other rule system that go to that length to establish, okay, this is where we're playing. There may be. Swords and Wizardry is real easy to slide into if you're used to playing D&D. Others, not so easy. So, look at it. Give it a whirl. Go to a con. That's kind of what cons, one of the great things about cons is you can sign up to play games that you've never played before and learn them while you're doing it. And see strategies developed by other players and that. So you not only learn the rules, but you learn a lot about the ebb and flow of the gameplay. Then there's the other idea. Okay, you've got your system established. This is what you like to play. These rules, using these dice, whatever. So now, let's go for something. And now for something, let's go for that something completely different. That's the milieu or the setting you put it in. Medieval Europe's been done to death. The desert's been done, whatever. When I wrote Snake Riders of the Arredondo several years ago, I created a jungle biome. I created fae that had been created by the elder races to look after the jungle, just as the other fae had been tasked to look after other living things and plants. I created three things that nobody had ever seen before. They were unique creations, monsters particularly. But I did it because I'm still not aware if anybody else has done a really good desert setting. Now, I'm not talking about Dune. I'm talking about swords and sorcery role-playing. So when it comes to milieus, if you want to do something really different, and this is part of what's got me so excited about it, is the book I told you about last week, The Gloaming. It all takes place in the deep forest. So now you're talking about boggarts and fae of many, many types, and naiads and dryads, and this individual's envisioning of them is just so amazingly different than what we're accustomed to seeing. And actually, where do we see them except in the occasional coffee table book of fantasy art or in kids' illustrations? Where else do we ever see them? I want to get this man's name again. Johnny Fraser Allen. Brilliant stuff. Now it's probably coming, that looks to me like it's going to come out in 5e. Okay. That's not a problem. Should it be a problem? I don't think it should be a problem. Because you can take if you can take any other idea that isn't already in a game system and lift it into your campaign, taking another system and converting its stats and characteristics and that to your system should be fairly easy. And now you, as the DM, have a completely new milieu for your players to have to set out in and battle all the things of the deep forest. The poisonous stinging insects, the flowers whose aroma can lull you to sleep, naiads, dryads, some really nasty tree-looking things that make it they're being caught in being in this forest is worse than Hansel and Gretel's nightmare ever was. All right, it's just levels above. And I think that you don't need to wait for new products to come out to do that on your own. But when outstanding and stellar products like these, I think you ought to at least go to your friendly local and look at them. That's all I got for tonight. So until next time, Dodata Gobi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.